We're going to get started. We're going to get underway. My name is Beth Crow. I'm with Michael Baker International. We're a consulting firm, and we are working with the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority on the creating something that's called the BEAD 5-year action plan and the digital equity plan, and you're going to hear all about that in just a couple of minutes. But I just wanted to introduce myself and say hello, and I actually wanted to ask if Mary Treadway would come up and just say a few words. Our co-host today is Infinite Erie, and Mary's with a leader with Infinite Erie, and thank you.
Thanks, Beth. Appreciate it. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. My name's Mary Treadway, and I'm here with Infinite Erie. Infinite Erie is an economic development intermediary that was founded here in Erie about 1 year ago, and we support the development of transformational projects throughout Erie County. One of those transformational projects is expanded high-speed broadband internet service to unserved or underserved areas throughout our region. So when the Broadband Pennsylvania Development Authority and Michael Baker International reached out to Infinite Erie to co-host this event, we were happy to partner alongside VNET and the Jefferson Educational Society. And I'd like to thank those from VNET who are here, Joel Duderman, Matt Wertel, and Brad Wertel, and also those from the Jefferson Educational Society, including President Ferky Ferrati and his team. I'd also like to thank representatives from Senator Fetterman's office who are here, Selena and Bobby. Thanks for being here. Community conversations like this are occurring throughout the Commonwealth and are critical in providing information to the state who's developing an action plan, like Beth mentioned, to ensure equitable, affordable broadband access for all residents, businesses, and communities. Your participation today is very much appreciated and is essential to supporting our collective interests in providing fast, reliable, high-speed broadband internet for all Erie County residents. So thank you again for being here today. I'll now turn it over back to Beth. Thank you.
The Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority, actually we have the Deputy Director, Brandon Peters, who's here with us today. We're so grateful as we're doing these 20 in-person conversations around the state. PBDA is at each one of these, and we're so instrumental in the discussions. Brandon, if you could say a few words.
Thanks, Beth. And it is very important. And as was mentioned, we are doing 20 of these across the state. And I think the reason we're able to make it to all of these is because we need to listen. We need to hear about the concerns that constituents across the state have regarding the broadband issues. So, what was it? 2 Mondays ago, we got word from President Biden about a historic investment in reliable high-speed infrastructure throughout the United States to the tune of $42.45 billion with a B across the United States. And Pennsylvania is actually one of the 19 states to receive more than $1 billion by ourselves. We actually got $1.16 billion to expand high-speed broadband internet to the unserved and underserved across the state. And so that's really our goal. And that's our goal here today as well, is to hear about the challenges and the concerns that each of you face. So don't hesitate. Don't be shy. Please provide feedback as you can and when you can. Additionally, the survey, is a really great tool that will allow us to take some of that information back and incorporate it into our planning process. So right now, and I think Beth will get into this here in a little bit, right now we're in a 5-year planning process for the BEAD program, as well as the digital equity statewide plan. So the input that you give here today is going to directly affect both of those plans. So please feel free to offer your experiences so far. And thank you all for being here. I know you took time out of your busy schedules, but this will be a really good event by just the sheer number that have showed up here to offer input. So thank you.
Okay, we're going to get underway then. keep going. We've gone through the welcome and introductions, the why we're here. So you've now heard us refer to the BEAD and the digital equity plans. And so let me just tell you a little bit about what these mean. So I'm going to go this way. Broadband equity access and deployment, that's BEAD. And that there's two separate programs here. There's the BEAD program and then there's the digital equity plan. And we're doing the planning, we, PBDA, Michael Baker, and through community conversations are the information that we get from these conversations informs both of those plans. So these sorts of discussions are really integral to the planning process. And just to distinguish these a couple of ways for you. So the BEAD allocation is in fact the over $1.1 billion that Brandon Peters just mentioned for the state of Pennsylvania. It's a big chunk of change for, you know, just that BEAD allocation. The digital equity plan is a smaller bucket of funding. BEAD is really more about infrastructure. Is a good way to look at it. It's about broadband assets of infrastructure and human resources and the state capacity to manage grants for these programs. For digital equity, it really is looking at the assets that are, it's an inventory of assets around digital equity and bringing digital equity to Pennsylvanians. So that's looking at programs that are delivering digital literacy, digital skills programs, looking at partners, maybe current partners, as well as looking down the road, who are the right partners in communities that the state can work with to get more digital skills programs up and running. And really ongoing local stakeholder engagement is part of that. It's part of both of them. So that BEAD funding, that BEAD plan, this 5-year action plan that we're doing is due to the state around mid-August, and the digital equity plan is due in the fall. I'll say that, just back up and say this might be a little too in the weeds for you, but with the federal government funding of BEAD, so there's a 5-year action plan that the state is working on right now. And then after that, there's an initial proposal that goes in, and then that gets reviewed and you know, looking for comments on that. And then after that, the final proposal goes in. So this is actually the beginning of what will be a very long process. And we're excited that there's going to be community engagement throughout that entire process to really get Pennsylvania to the point where it's ready to get all Pennsylvanians connected to the internet across the state. So. Just a quick overview of our meeting. We're going to do an icebreaker. And then spend just a little bit of time talking about Broadband 101. And that's nothing you're going to be tested on. It really is just to make sure that we all are on the same page about what we're talking about and the understanding that you need when you get to the questions and discussions for the survey that you'll be taking. And along the way through the survey, we're going to ask you to pick your head up and stop filling in blanks and share with us some comments to some specific things. And then we'll go to open discussion. It's our icebreaker. If your internet was an animal, what animal would it be and why? And it's a great question. We actually love this question. We get all kinds of responses to this from cheetah. They're lucky people that their internet is a cheetah. And then there's a really big range. And so far, one of my favorites is dead turtle. You don't get any slower apparently than a dead turtle. So let's see some hands. We'd love to know, if you had to describe your internet, how would you do that? What animal? Sloth. Yeah. Does anybody have a cheetah? You do? Okay. Okay. Do you think that's because of where you live in the county?
It's where I live, and it's the fact that I'm connected with fiber optics.
Okay. 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 How about others?
I would echo the same. Where we are, regionally, we were very lucky to get fiber optics strong and run.
Mm-hmm.
It's dependable, it's fast, and
Wow.
And dead turtle is actually too kind. You know the turtle's dead, and you don't have to try to expect it. So no, now we're in a good spot, but certainly we're one of the outliers in the county.
Yeah. Yeah, good feedback. Anybody else want to weigh in? Well, we definitely have the range, right, between sloth and cheetah. So understanding the internet speed is, again, important for this conversation because it is the basis for some of the questions we're going to ask you in our survey. So I will say just this, raise your hand if you've ever experienced having a website take a long time to load or having an email take too long to send. That's definitely me. So the reason for the slow load time is likely due to your internet speed. Everything we do on the internet, homework, Facebook, streaming movies, playing video games, it all uses a broadband connection, and that connection has two speeds, download and upload. Download speed is the speed of getting information from the web to your computer, and upload speed is the reverse. And in addition to your speed, the number of devices that are being used on your internet also influences how fast your speed is or how it might slow down. The way that I like to think of it is like a highway. If you have a 2-lane highway and it has some bends in it and there's only you on it, or maybe you going this way and one car going that way, you can move at a clip, it's not a problem. Put a bunch of cars now on that same road, and the road doesn't get any bigger, the bends don't straighten out, you still have those same constraints, but now you're all moving a lot slower because there are so many of you on it. So broadband internet speed is much like that as well. So the delivery methods. So while we still have a ways to go, with internet speeds, they're not as bad as they once were, which is some people in the room may remember. If your home was on the internet and you picked up the phone to make a call, you kicked them off the internet. So things are a little bit better than that, but they're not really quite there yet, because what the federal government means by broadband and internet for all is broadband that is always on. So there is no kicking off, there is no dropping, it is always on, it is always available. So there's no test on any of this, but I do want to run through the speeds, and thank you for your fiber description, because you got us really most of the way there, actually. Fiber is currently the fastest way for internet data. It has the fastest upload speeds than any other service that's available. It's really good for video conferencing and for gaming, as well as every other activity that doesn't take as much speed or bandwidth. It uses lines made of small fiberglass strands. And it transfers data at literally the speed of light. So cable internet is another high-speed option for connecting to the internet. It offers fast download speeds, reliable service, and is available, actually usually available to more people than, say, fiber is. Cable is often offered as part of a bundle with your cable TV package, and it uses, as it sounds, cable wires to provide the connection. It's good for upload speeds, it's not as fast as fiber. And then we start to get much slower. So DSL is the digital subscriber line. It's an older internet technology. It uses a phone line to connect to the internet and to transfer data. Its speed is limited, and it's good for, say, browsing the internet and checking email, but not a whole lot more than that. Fixed wireless, it uses an outdoor antenna and an indoor Wi-Fi router to connect. This option is most common in rural areas where fiber cable or DSL lines are not available. You need an antenna to be able to use fixed wireless, and the antennas need to have a clear line of sight from your house to the tower, so to get a strong signal. It's slower than both fiber and cable. Satellite is another good option in rural settings. Well, actually, we talked to a lot of people in rural settings through these community conversations, and I'm not sure any of them would say it was a good option. I think what they would say is it has been their only option in some cases. But at any rate, it is more common in rural areas, and it, as it sounds, it uses satellites orbiting the Earth. It's one of the slowest internet options that there are. And then mobile wireless. Broadband services are also widely available through mobile broadband service providers. Typically, these are slower than either wired or fixed wireless alternatives. So again, you're not going to be tested on any of that, but want to give you just this sort of base understanding of it. Back to the speed, because the speed is important. Every page, every image, every video on the web, it comes to our devices in pieces. They're packets of data. So little pieces of data that form packets. And this is where that download and that upload speed is working behind the scenes all of the time, moving these packets back and forth. The way the speed is measured is megabits per second. Download speed is usually the larger number, and as we know, as I just said, that's the one that indicates how fast data is being delivered to your device from the internet, while the upload speed, or smaller number, indicates how quickly information from your device is transferred to the internet. Unserved and underserved. When we think about the BEAD funding and also the digital equity funding, so this enormous historic funding that's coming from the federal government, the priority for the funding, who gets hooked up, right, is going to be first, unserved, second, underserved. And they don't leave it to interpretation what those things mean. So unserved and underserved actually is defined by speed. So unserved, so let's go back to speeds and let's think about that 25 download, 3 upload speed. If you have that, then you are being served. If you, though, can't do anything faster than that, if you can't say get to the 100, you're underserved. So the expectation is everybody needs to be at a very fast speed. If, on the other hand, you have the internet and you don't even get 25.3, you're considered unserved, like as if you don't have internet at all. And another sort of interesting observation, and not at all surprising, that what we're seeing as we talk to people in the community, especially in the rural areas, there's quite a few people who have internet, and that they don't get speeds anywhere near that. And so they were saddened to hear that they are considered to be unserved, although at the same time, hopeful that that means the situation will change. So we're going to move on to actually the survey. And Kirsten, and I think I need to stay at the mic. The room's kind of big, so Kirsten's going to pass out the surveys. Oh, thanks, Mary. She's going to help out. And the pens. I'm not sure. We might have them in the back. Hey, Mary, is the box of pens in the back? Ah, thank you. The Deputy Director of PBDA is, thank you for handing out those pens. Okay, so we have a survey, and what we had in mind when we first thought about these sessions is we'd ask you to do a section and then pause, and we'd have a conversation, and what we're finding is lots of people are just continuing to go on with the survey. So we don't want to stop that at all. And so I will, though, be standing here in the background giving you some context about why we're asking the questions that we're asking. And I will say this, I believe that this is being live streamed onto to Facebook. And so I want to say, if we have any friends that are watching it, live stream, you too can take the survey. You want to go to surveymonkey.com / right, small r, / capital P, capital A, _ BCDA. Those are all caps. And so again, surveymonkey.com / lowercase r, / uppercase PA _ BCDA. And you're able to take that as well, and we'd really appreciate you doing so. I'll say for the folks in the room and anyone that might be online, as this is completely anonymous. So you'll see we did not take your name to register. We are not asking for your name on this survey. There will be, at the very end, some questions about demographics, and we really hope that you answer those, but they're not associated with your name, so it's nothing traceable to you. The first section on the survey is about access and subscriptions. And so while you look at that and start to answer these questions, I'm just going to say a few things here in the background. That certainly the pandemic placed our country's gaps in internet service under a microscope, but many areas of Pennsylvania actually have long known about the challenges of accessing affordable, reliable, high-speed internet. And so that's why we're asking questions that relate to your home internet access and your subscriptions. I will say this too, you're going to answer for yourself, but for folks in the room that may be representing organizations, whether it be elected or whether it be nonprofits or whether it be economic development, if you're representing if the people you serve are low income, for example, or have different challenges than the challenges you're facing as you fill out your own answers, we would love to hear about that. And so when we get to talking a little bit and having a discussion, please don't shy away from saying, something that I hear from our clients all the time is XYZ, because we really need that feedback as well. So we're asking these questions to get a baseline for whether individuals and families have devices to get online, how they are getting online, and where they are getting online. I think people are probably through this section, and it's fine if you are, fine if you're not. I am going to say this is where we would like to ask for a little bit of verbal input from you. We know we asked the animal question, what do you think of your internet service or speed? But we'd really like to know, do you know what your actual internet speed is? Raise your hand if you know what your internet speed is. Okay, less than half. Okay, so maybe closer to half. But of those that know what their speed is it close to the advertised speed that you're paying for? Raise your hand if it's yes. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. And I think for those of you that don't know what your internet speed is, if you'd like to know, there are lots of tests online to be able to test your broadband speed. Go, I'd say, first to fcc.gov, and there's a speed test. So I think this other question is, are there areas, locations where you can't currently access the internet, but you wish you could? So let me ask this in two different ways. So first, inside your own home, are there areas that your internet is just not reaching, that you need it to reach in your home? Raise your hand if that's a yes. Okay. What do you do about that? Yep, sorry. If you don't mind, I'm sorry. Okay. Right. And just out of curiosity too, is it a big house, an old house? Yeah. Well, I ask because we hear this in other community conversations, and I'll say even more so maybe in more urban environments, or not rural. We'll just say not rural. And but it's interesting that I'm not hearing a lot of consistency in house size or age, right? It sort of runs the gamut. So, and sir, if you don't mind, what do you do?
We either move or we to a different part of the house, or we walk outside.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think this goes back to that digital literacy effort you talked about at the beginning of the program, DE. So many consumers aren't sure what their options are to do whole home coverage. I was responsible for a survey with one of our school districts in the area, And the number of folks who said, yeah, the internet works, but when I turn the microwave on, internet stops. Or, the kids are in this room, but if they go to this room, it works a lot better. It's just the literacy it would take to bring folks to actually consume that service through the house, where they want it, when they want it. There's a lot of opportunity there to really go out, especially in the rural communities, and even, I guess, in the urban ones, and have those conversations or make programs available to do that. Because you can have as much of it as you want, but if your microwave kills it every time, you probably don't have it set up the way it should be.
You're exactly right. I actually worked for an ISP, and I didn't know until they came into my mother's house and pointed out that we had the router sitting right behind the television, that's not the best place for it. And, because it interferes with the signal. I didn't know that, but can I ask you, actually, not to pick on you because you were nice enough to speak, but in the school district survey that you did, were you getting at how many families had internet access?
Absolutely. I can share all that data with you. We can take it offline.
Yeah. Just another quick question. Did you find that people said they have internet access when in fact the access was only on their cell?
So actually, throughout that survey, we tried to differentiate data, finding multiple homes who had some form of internet that was very would qualify as unserved based on your speed data, would still bring home hotspots like school provided, PA Department of Education provided, and they would be using multiple internet services in the same house and still feel unserved because none of them could meet the criteria they wanted. So I have the data from folks who used at-home school hotspots, personal hotspots that they acquired through their own cell contract. All of that is represented.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. My question was along the lines too of educating people, educating consumers, right? I know we saw that there were families who definitely, their answer was, the question was, do you have internet? The answer was yes, and in fact, they had it on their cell, like they didn't have it at home. But yeah, thank you. Okay, we're going on, and you maybe moved ahead. The next section is about internet use. So the questions in this section tackle issues such as online activities, device access and use, and internet issues. As you answer these questions, we'll provide this context. So there are all kinds of surveys out there. There are two in particular that we thought really spoke to this issue, and one of them is from Pew Research Center. The other one comes from the American Community Survey. So first, the Pew Research Center. They did a survey on a national level. This was during the pandemic. And the question, one of the questions was, how essential, how important is the internet? This was for adults. And what their survey found was a little more than half of adults said that the internet was essential for them personally. But then there was another third of adults who said that it was important, but not essential, but still important and then essential. And so that's a huge number of people that, clearly understand that it is essential for everything that we're doing, school, work, telehealth, banking, government services. There's quite a list of how it is becoming more and more essential. Bringing it down to a state level, the American Community Survey, they have data that tells us that 11% of Pennsylvania households lack broadband subscriptions. Almost 25% of households are not using the internet. And more than 36% of households, they're not using a PC or a tablet. So they are just using their phone if they're using anything at all. We recognize that not everybody wants to be online. But again, with all of the e-commerce, education, health, it really is essential that everybody has the ability to access that. Oops. So with internet use, let me ask this. Does everybody in your household have access to a computer whenever they need it? So if that answer is yes, raise your hand. Okay, that's That's a good portion. Thinking about the members of your household, how many, everybody does have access to a device when they need it, right? So, and then when you think about, let's say yourself and the members of your household, is there a device of choice for you first, right? So is there one that you gravitate to first? Actually, I think I maybe want to move on here. Is that your phone? Is that your tablet? Is that your laptop? Is there something that is your go-to?
So again, both of us can work from home, so obviously work laptops take precedence, but then smartphones, we have laptops, we have services available for the kids for, to amuse them and not annoy us. But all of it's always available all the time. I guess it just depends on what we're doing. To answer your question.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask too, for people in the room that may be, yourself aside, but if you are in a role or in an organization where you're serving others, other constituents, is there commonality in what you see from them or know from them about their device use? Is it always on their phone, laptops, any insight? Go ahead.
I would say that one of the biggest challenges for speed is related to what people's speed is on their cell phones versus what their wireline speed is, right? So we get calls or emails from customers saying, hey, I've got a big service, but I'm only getting 300 or 400 megs on my iPhone. Well, that's because that's the maximum limitation on your iPhone. You have to explain to them the differences between over-the-air speed and actually wireline speed. And then it would be interesting to know, I just pulled up mine, I've got 18 devices connected at home, and not everything's connected, and I know I've talked to other customers that have 30, 40, 50 devices connected. So I think that's maybe something for you guys to look at in terms of, especially smart home and streaming. There's more devices than you realize until you can pull up your app and say, holy cow, I do have 18 devices connected to the internet at the time. Now that we're not using them all, but they're all, it could be a water meter, it could be cameras, it could be all sorts of different things. So when you're looking at your graphic from earlier, like 3 to 4 connected devices, it's probably 4 to 5 times that now.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and the things that maybe people aren't considering but are. So to your point, maybe it's the water heater, it's the robot vacuum cleaner, it's your smart refrigerator. Yep.
I just want to use Matt's comments to tack on. That's why an equal upstream is so important to your downstream, because so much of what we do nowadays is bi-directional. That if somebody in one of your 50 devices in your household is sending something, and you're on an asynchronous connection, which most are, but the upstream is 100 gigs, I'm sorry, 100 megs, and it's able to send that data instantaneously, then the downstream isn't throttled.
Right.
That's critically important. And I get a little upset when I see these, what I deem fairly anemic numbers coming out. I think 100 down, 20 up, that's not really even by that a usable number, a usable standard. A house with 50 devices.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Yeah. Thank you. We're going on in the survey. The next section is about affordability and satisfaction. We know that affordability is different for different people. What's affordable for you might be different for the person who's next to you, just sitting there, or even somebody in the next county. So this series of questions is going to give the PBDA insight from us, from the consumers, about current rates, about bundled services, about whether or not there's competition for service, and sort of general sentiment about it. And again, I'm going to guess that people have gone ahead a little bit. And if you didn't, that's fine. Go ahead and answer your questions. But if you're ready, we'd like to actually talk about this a little bit. Okay, can you raise your hand if you bundle your services? Okay, thank you. So those of you that raised your hands, the question is, do you think it's valuable? I'm going to pick on you.
Sure. I do. I would say that I think especially now you're getting less, with bundle with cable, you're getting less and less people who have cable services nowadays. They're going by the wayside. That'd be my big takeaway. But, you know, the bundle is definitely a good value, I would say.
I think it should be separated personally. I think the providers are forcing us into bundling because they're saying, oh, we'll bundle it and we're getting less on the internet speeds. I mean, I have a DSL connection.
Okay.
My speeds are 2.7 and 0.7
Wow.
on DSL.
I don't know if everybody heard that. His speeds on DSL are 2.7 and 0.7. So not very fast, and you're part of a bundle.
And it's bundled with my phone line,
Okay.
which is ridiculous. You know, it really shouldn't be. But Verizon doesn't give us a whole lot of choices.
Okay. Are there other providers to choose from where you are? Okay.
Not
Yep.
at all.
I figured.
I wouldn't change.
Yeah. I can't remember now who had their hands up, but if you had bundled service, do you think it's valuable?
I'll throw in, I would say, it's convenient. That's one thing.
What, if you don't mind me asking, what's your bundle?
Phone, computer, internet, and television.
Landline phone. Yep. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. The other question here, and I sort of asked it a little bit, is do you know how many providers currently serve your area? So if you only have one choice, can you raise your hand? Maybe a third.
Just a clarification on this, and this will come back to when we discussed that survey I was talking about. You know, technically satellite, and even now low orbit satellite, is available to everyone.
Yes.
And this goes back to digital literacy. Do you know that, right?
Yeah.
Do you know your cell phone can be a hotspot that only works when it's not thunderstorming or snowing outside, right? And I think that's where a lot, especially in the rural area that I focused on, so many of those folks did not have, they did not know what services were available, because to the gentleman's point earlier, if you're served by Verizon on the phone line and then they present you with that as your bundle option, you might stop looking there.
Right.
You know, and granted, you know, again, low orbit, that's a whole new thing. There's all sorts of, as an emerging business plan, and whether, how fast that gets rolled out and at what price point, and there's a lot there, right? But I think that really comes down to digital literacy and folks understanding what's available in their neighborhood. And, you know, because so many times, you know, I'm sure VNET can speak to this, you know, they can only run so much fiber, and you might literally be the next cul-de-sac down, and your neighbors have it, but you don't. And do you know that? Again, that's just
Right.
one of those things.
You know, but I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to address,
Yep.
low orbit satellite is not available everywhere. Matter of fact, I checked this morning,
Oh.
and Starlink is not available in my area.
Sure.
And it's very limited, and it's very expensive, is the problem.
Oh, yeah.
And when you're looking at Starlink, you're looking at minimum right now is $600 to start with. And they just raised the price to $110 a month. Yeah, it's a good service. I know 2 people that have it, and the speeds are great. But is that going to stay that way as more people get onto it? Is my problem.
The limited service and offering from a coverage perspective, as well as to your point, the price, the initial price point to enter that, and then what does that service evolve to over time? I'm not advocating for it. Please understand, I am by no means pitching low orbit as the solution to this. Fiber optic wired broadband is the way to go. But, you know, if you also decide to build, you know, your hilltop retreat on top of a mountain in the Alleghenies, and low orbit satellite is your only option because of your choices, okay, I think trying to disseminate that data from, hey, there are 9 farms on this rural road, and they'd love to bring in anything other than low orbit, that's a very hard thing to determine, you know, what coverage areas are really available for those prospective consumers to then go and acquire something that will work for them. It's sometimes a matter of choice, sometimes a matter of opportunity.
Yep. Did you want to add
can I
anything?
jump in?
Yeah, please.
So the satellite discussion is certainly something that's very interesting. You know, and satellite has come leaps and bounds, you know, over the past couple of years. But from a federal perspective, in the ways that we can actually spend Pennsylvania's allotment, is that satellite is currently not an option. Obviously, fiber is the gold standard. Fiber is, it's somewhat future-proof in that, the speeds will last well into the future. It's a hard infrastructure item. Fixed wireless is another one that's a potential solution. Cable is another potential solution. Fixed wireless is a solution because it's local enough that you can see a towel with a direct link to homes, and that can match speeds. Unfortunately, satellite with its latency issues and the speeds it can achieve doesn't meet the thresholds for broadband. Having said that, like you said, I mean, there are some instances where you literally are in the middle of nowhere, and it's going to be a difficult hill to climb for us to reach you with fiber, cable, or fixed wireless. So we have to weigh those things. But as it is now, Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority, the state of Pennsylvania will not be investing in satellite options.
Which makes sense.
Thank you, Brina. You hit on everything that I would have said. Fiber is absolutely the gold standard. One of the things that is so critically important to me with these once-in-a-lifetime monies is that they be deployed towards the most as you said, future-proof tech available. Therefore, getting the greatest ROI on this massive investment. The worst thing that could happen is if we deploy the wrong tech and 5 or 10 years later, we're back here doing this again. That would be a tragedy. So that's all.
That's a great point. Thank you for that point. And to that point, this is once generational. We're not going to see these kind of funds, again. And so it is incumbent upon us to get the job done. President Biden, whenever he announced this a couple weeks ago, it was internet for all, not internet for some. And so we have these funds, and some of the other pots of funds that we've been working in to deliver the service, internet for all, by the year 2030. So that's our goal. That's our charge. That's what we're endeavoring towards. Now, we have to recognize that fiber is the option that we're going for, but it may not be feasible to take fiber to every one of those internet for all homes that we want to reach. And so it's part of our job with Baker's help and our other partners and ISPs. ISPs absolutely are going to be a part of this to figure out which solution, which technology works where. And so that's kind of where we are now and where we'll be for the next couple of years, trying to determine that as we start to see projects come in and we start to see what works where. That's something. It's going to be a continual learning process throughout the next several years.
Yep.
So I don't know if this is the right point to jump in on this, but it sounds like we're going down that road. So previous to the pandemic and before this money became available, the federal government did an auction where they auctioned off by zip code places that did not have internet accessibility. And throughout Erie County, we have at least 7 service providers. Starlink was one of them, which I understand that the federal government has essentially taken back all of the auction zip codes that Starlink got.
Oh.
Which potentially might be why it's not available as part of this money that we're talking about now. At any rate, all of these service providers are coming into the community, providing different, from fiber optic to coaxial cable type wire. And there's just a broad spectrum of, from what we see in fiber optic for the future and what just gets us by to meet the minimum requirements. Is there conversations about the uniform, creating a uniform establishment, or at least getting the service providers to upping their what they're providing to the service communities? Because all of this is already underway. These things are already happening previous to this money coming in. And now we have this money. And as was said, I mean, this is our opportunity to make this right, not just for now, but for our future. And we really got to focus on how we're doing this in the community-wide. And when I say that, all of Erie County, because that's where these service providers are at. So, and certainly there's no question that if we're going to prepare for the future to be competitive economically, to be able to attract businesses, we've got to have the fiber optic. We've got to have what is best for the future.
So, very good points. Thank you for that feedback. And that's why I think we're starting with fiber optic. As far as we can take that with the funds that we have, we definitely want to start with fiber optic. To your point, for uniform technology and all of that. Having said that, I think it's worth recognizing also that there's been technological leaps and bounds made from fixed wireless technology as well. In terms of most of those fixed wireless assets actually have fiber right to the tower, and so the backhaul is all fiber where the speed is. So some of those fixed wireless assets can actually, I guess I don't want to speak technically, but they can get speeds that are very, very fast, 2 gig from what I understand, which is great. Also, there's a lot of though it might be cable, coaxial cable that comes to your home, much of that currently is also has fiber backhaul that can carry large heavy speeds. UC Cable a couple years ago, cable couldn't achieve the super fast speeds, and now with all that fiber backhaul, oftentimes it can. So I do hear your point about the necessary future proofing of this infrastructure that we're building. Something that's certainly on our minds. And again, fiber to the premise is certainly something that is our goal, if at all possible, within the realization that we have fiscal realities that we have to manage these funds. But very good point. Thank you.
Any other thoughts to share? No? Okay. Okay, let's go on to the last part of the survey, which now I'm sure you've taken, is about digital skills. And so I'm going to go right to some of our questions that and this question is really focused on education, workforce development, training opportunities, if you know of things online. I think though, as we're talking here today and looking at the room, this is not the right question for the room. Everybody seems to have pretty good speed, I think, and access. I think though, to some points you made about digital literacy, digital skills, frankly, just knowledge. Following up on something that you said, it's been essentially up to the providers to inform people how their systems work and what's available to them. If there are other competitors, there's not a big incentive, right, to point out that you might be able to get a better price with my competitor. So when you think about that, and what's the right body to be ensuring that people are getting the kind of information that they need?
Yeah, it's a great point. And especially because this is capitalism focused, right? We're still talking about internet providers. You're still acquiring and purchasing some sort of commodity from someone else. So you're right, the incentive for a provider to steer them that way generally lessens. And truthfully, once the service is available in the home, do they care how well it's being consumed? I mean, the more and more literate the consumers are, the more of that service they're going to take away, and the more work, in theory, the provider has to do on the back end. Now, I'm sure that isn't true for every provider, but I mean, that's kind of how we work as a capitalistic society, if you will. So what can we do? I mean, I would think you would start to look at kind of like from the local library or from the local community college or from the local IU sitting in your county or your region to help provide those type of digital services with some sort of program, sponsored program that, hey, it's a free for all. We're not Geek Squad. We're not going to come into your home and fix it for you, but we can at least give you some ideas and some thoughts here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.
My point I always make with people is, do you get an instruction manual when you get your
out a shortcut that you've been struggling with that you never knew about, right? So I think if you can do better than Apple, which is the best company,
Yeah.
company on the planet, to Jeff's point, I think tweaking around the edges, how to set up something with a teledoc, how to, leverage, the resources of the library are huge. You have to invest the time to understand what they're doing there and try to take it upon yourself to do that. So if it is working with the school districts, with the IU, with the Infinite Erie Community Foundation, ECRA, Jefferson, whoever can help kind of be the evangelist in terms of what's out there, I think it's important. Especially now in today's day and age where cybersecurity, everyone potentially is at risk, and most people don't understand that text message from the Postal Service on a Saturday afternoon isn't for a package that you're waiting for. Those sorts of things go a long way too. So I think the internet is just one piece. How to use it is one of the other pieces, and we are very rarely scratching the surface on what we actually can do on our connections, just because nobody's ever trained us. They just give us the connections, say, go do with what you wish, and hopefully you'll figure it out. So
Yeah.
it's a little bit better than Apple, because it is frustrating when you use an iPhone. They walk you through setting it up, but it's like, okay, how do I use any of these apps? I have no idea.
Yeah, the user manual's online. It's just, forget it. Yeah. Right.
I'd just like to say one thing to dovetail with your last comments is the importance, albeit enormous sums of money, they're finite. So how do we use them in the most judicial way possible? And keeping those funds as local to the community as is possible is critically important to getting, again, that greatest ROI. If for no reason, the multiplier effect associated with those sums of monies being put into a singular community.
I'm sorry, what, can I just clarify for myself? When you say keep that in the local community, what do you mean?
So if a VNET, which is a local company, 80 employees, 80 families, hundreds of people in the community is awarded some portion of those funds, rather than a spectrum, which will siphon them right out of the area, then those economic multiplier effects can occur. Otherwise, they drop in and they disappear over.
I understand what you're saying. So it's the giant internet service providers and then the not giant service providers.
So it's, local.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really keen on right now.
That's a really good point in that one of the things that certainly is of value to the authority is communities that have gone through and have done their due diligence and their legwork to become a broadband ready community. And what does that mean? That's something we're currently trying to define. But that have gone through, met with the ISPs that exist in their footprint, that have gone through and looked at some of the permitting hurdles that they may have on a local level, because they can't really control the state permitting levels, which is something we're working on as well. But some of those other issues, that they can position themselves, whether it be a county, a locality of some sort, municipality, city, and the like, whatever they can do to position themselves to be ready to accept these broadband funds is something that is going to be valued, throughout our competitive processes, where we have to select, projects from across the state.
So I think that's one area where our local municipalities are probably lacking, is any sort of kind of guidance to be a broadband ready community. What is your geographic density? What roads would pick up the most amount of people? How many prospective consumers are going to come in on this run? And there is no centralized repository that I'm aware of for the state of Pennsylvania for municipalities to go seek that, let alone reach out proactively to them and give them something to go focus on and something to do to be ready. Because when the dollars are there, they're only there for a set amount of time. And if you're not ready and it takes X amount of days to get it ready, you might miss that window, or get a severely diminished service or product offering because of what that window looked like. And I don't think we as the legislature or the government, and look at asking government to solve all of our problems, but that could certainly be something that we're doing to piggyback to get folks ready for this type of service.
Great observation. One of the things that we're working on now is, I don't want to call it a checklist because it's more than a checklist, but a checklist of what makes a broadband ready community. So, and I think that that's going to be pretty valuable to the ones that maybe, you know, have several of the items already checked off, and to those that are just starting. So, you know, we currently have the CPF BIP program that's currently open, $200 million pot of funds for projects across the state. But whenever these BEAD funds start rolling, you know, it's not like we're going to put $1.16 billion on the road at one point. You know, there's going to be potentially, you know, multiple iterations of that over a few year period. And so we intend to hone that checklist in and help, you know, these municipalities or counties or whoever the community is to become successful with it. The one other thing I do want to address, the gentleman actually left, but again, questions about digital equity and digital literacy, if you have points about it. Just so everyone knows, you know, we have that 1.16 billion that is for infrastructure. We're also potentially going to receive some money that is for digital equity for education programs to help teach individuals utilizing those community resources that you all outlined as a good opportunity, as a medium to kind of convey some of those really, you know, what maybe some might take for granted, just general digital literacy. And so we hope to get that on the road here soon too. We actually have, so in-house with the authority, we actually have, you know, our infrastructure team that works on things, and we also have the digital equity team that is striving to close the digital gap. You can have, you know, you can have all the internet around you that you want, but if you can't access it, what value is it to you? And I'm not talking just from from the edification standpoint, but also from the devices that you have. You may not have the appropriate devices to access it as well. So that's the other arm of what it is we're doing.
And just one last point to piggyback, I think too, you know, I am just thinking about the local municipalities and governments I work with, or I'm a community of, you know, most of the time you're looking at a very certain demographic, especially here in Erie County. They tend to be more on the retired side because it's not like it's a lucrative career. Tend to be, you know, older, you know, males or females, and maybe digital literacy isn't necessarily there. So when you come to them with this checklist of things they can do, you know, they almost need a resource or a hotline or some sort of institution that they can reach out to help them pull this data together and put it in a better place, because it's not why they're in that job. They're in that job because, you know, Bill down the street doesn't like the fact that the creek is thrown, you know, flowing through his field, and he wants to get that fixed. And, you know, broadband is the least of their concerns, but also one of the most important things to their constituents. And I think that's where, you know, there would, having resources for them as well would be a huge boon to getting that process moving in the right direction.
I know your hand was up.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We bring up a lot about local government engagement and where the municipalities are in the county. The counties partner with the Erie Council of Governments to do just what you're speaking of, identify all un- and underserved addresses in Erie County on behalf of the municipalities. We know, like you said, municipal leaders can't do this list on their own. 38 municipalities in Erie County, some 500 people live in some of the municipalities. Those folks, borough council members and supervisors are part-time. So the Council of Governments, and my colleague Michelle Dagas here, had initiated a process to identify those underserved and unserved addresses on behalf of the municipalities so that we can go and compete for these dollars, both the Pennsylvania Capital Projects Fund and then later down the road the BEAD Fund. We have identified approximately 3,500 true unserved under the 25 gig speeds addresses in Erie County, and we put out an RFP to look for internet service providers who might serve those. So we're helping the municipalities as a collective. You don't want all 38 trying to do this on their own and be crazy. We want to compete. We want to be the most competitive with our grant applications when we're ready to do those. So that is underway. Just to give you confidence that we're working together.
Can I ask you, I'm sorry, go ahead and then I'll come back to you. Go ahead.
My name is Sandra, I'm with Spectrum, and I wanted to just go back to a point from about a half hour ago. One of the things Spectrum does is give out grants to local not-for-profit organizations to go out, and they can do whatever they want to do with the money, but they also will tell you about other providers that are in the area. So AT&T, Verizon, we don't restrict what they can talk about. So if a company or a family wants to go to our competitor, we just want to provide you with information. So we don't, like I said, you can't talk about another company.
Right.
You can't talk about anybody. So that's one of the ways we're trying to make sure people are literate and understand their choices and everything.
So Spectrum is giving grants to nonprofit organizations to help with digital literacy. And Spectrum is very clear that that those nonprofits can talk about any provider and every provider. Is that, yeah, well, that's a wonderful program. Mhm. That's great, thank you. I wanted to ask you a question if I could. On the lady back there, as you're looking at addresses and who's served and who's not served, are you basing that on the FCC map? How are you identifying an address that is not served?
Sure, so we actually contracted with a vendor out of New York, PCC Technologies, and they did ground travel throughout the county on rural roads to identify the infrastructure that was available.
In addition to looking at the FCC maps, but actually field analysis.
Yeah,
Tremendously
yeah,
helpful.
it's great.
Have you guys worked with our GIS department on that? Kyle, our GIS department.
The county GIS department does have access to the fabric data and all those different things, and they've worked with Pennsylvania Broadband Authority to upload our documents as well. Before that, we were really engaged in the challenge to do
Yeah.
FCC challenges to edits we knew were also unserved or misrepresented on this.
So the challenge process at this point is of the utmost importance in terms of, I mentioned that we have this charge of our own, which is Internet for All. It's hard to do that if you don't know where the disparities are, where there are unserved individuals and households, PSLs, broadband serviceable locations. So that's really one of the things that our infrastructure team is working on very heavily, is to continue to identify these homes. So at every chance I get, I always point to the FCC map and the challenge process, because whether it's on the individual level or on the county level, like that's happening, we absolutely want folks to take a look at that map and say, I do have that service, or I don't have that service, or whatever it is. The chances are that it probably will be right, but it may not be. There's a real possibility that it may not be. So that we just want individuals and the counties and municipalities just to look at that challenge process, so that we can continually work toward the best version of that map, so we can achieve our charge of Internet for All.
I think that, and definitely, let me get to you. I just want to tag on to what Brandon said and just say I think that PBDA is modest in this regard. So for people who don't live and breathe this stuff, just the quick story on the map is the FCC has a map. You can go right now. You can go to it. You can look up your address, and you can see if it says you have service or you don't. But the way that the map worked is that if a internet service provider provide just one home in a census tract, the whole census tract showed as having service. That was a flaw in the map with the FCC. And so in the run-up to this historic funding, they said, submit challenges, right? And so you as a homeowner could get on there, and believe me, I mean, I've been in remote West Virginia where they have no internet, and the guy like pulls it up and goes, it says I have service. And it's like, yeah, you don't. So people submitted challenges and said, no, that's not correct. Now, the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority submitted
With our partners, it was over 50,000 challenges.
50,000 challenges for Pennsylvania. That is one of the highest numbers of challenges submitted in the entire country. I think they're modest about this. They really got in there right from the beginning and trying to fight for, to make sure that the unserved locations are actually showing up. And there's certainly more work to do, but BEAD funding is based on that map. So it's really important. Yep.
One of the interesting thought, I always thought it would be a fascinating trip down. Why don't we lobby for the Pennsylvania Realtor Association, or all of those things associated with buying and selling homes, of which there are millions of laws on the books, to then have to disclose internet, which is a constantly changing thing. Why not declare what internet service providers on your MLS listing when you go to sell a home or move into an apartment?
Oh.
Like that, because that's a step toward very easy digital literacy. You just have to read a field. And to my knowledge, there are no laws on the books around anything.
That's a great idea. I've never heard that. That's a great idea. And yeah, I do want to come back to you. Yeah.
On the FCC challenge piece, the Erie County led an initiative to help people who challenge their address that was listed improperly during that window, the challenge window.
Hmm.
It was between Thanksgiving and
Yeah.
Very
It was this big.
compressed, but although we did all the challenges, we did a public outreach and we had citizens could call or send email to help them to challenge their addresses. But since that time, because we've had the contractor that's working with the cause identify unserved, now the GIS staff is going back into FCC and challenging the addresses that we've learned through the process. So we're continuing to challenge on behalf of Erie County and Pennsylvania to help fix up that FCC map.
Yeah, thank you for that. And like I said, a couple months ago when it was a big deal because it affected the beat allocation to a minimal extent, but it did. And we tried very hard at that time to get as many in as possible to affect our beat allocation. The truth is now, what we're really trying to do, again, is just get the best version of the map so we know where folks are that are unserved and underserved. So thank you for your efforts there. That's much appreciated.
Yes, sir.
So a question in regards to all of that. So the challenge period for the address is ended June 30th, isn't that correct? And that was for the allocation of funds? So the challenge that's continuing to go on is just to add people in?
Yeah,
That's not going to change.
That's not going to change. It was actually not June 30th. It was January. Was when we could have affected any funds. And even before that, there was a location challenge that happened in mid to late last year. And those two things were the things that affected the allocation. We haven't been able to affect that since. And so late last month, we received the 1.16 billion. So yeah, again, now it's not about the allocation. Now it's about making sure we get service to everybody.
And how is that going to change the map if they set their map?
It's not.
They're constantly.
They're constantly changing. So that might have been version 3, and I think what we're working on now is either version 3 or version 4. But there's constant version updates that they plan on updating. So we'll continually reevaluate the fabric.
But it's not going to change the money allocation.
No.
Okay. We're gonna move on. We're almost, we're gonna wrap up pretty soon here, but this is a public service announcement. This is about affordability. So the American Connectivity Program is from the federal government. This is a subsidy that qualified individuals and households they're able to get up to $30 a month for internet and a one-time discount for a device. There's a long list of how you qualify for ACP. So I'll just use one example. Families that qualify for food stamps or SNAP, they qualify for this. If you have a student who's getting a Pell Grants, they qualify for this. Disabilities, there's quite a long list. For those of you that are serving the community, that's 200% of poverty is the guideline for ACP, whereas say, as a comparison, SNAP is 150% of poverty. So even if I point that out to say, if you have a family that says, oh, I don't qualify for food stamps, that doesn't mean that they don't qualify for ACP. So it's something to keep in mind. We've included an ACP flyer. We would encourage you to share that with anyone you know that might be qualified for it, because it definitely is game changing for families. So that's our public service announcement on that.
Has there been any effort to socialize ACP with PA Department of Ed down into like elementary and high school levels? To like put that in your, I don't know, kindergarten enrollment packet or your back to school packet or anything like that, because that's where you're going to catch most of these families who would really be benefit from that is, oh, now my kids are going back to school, it's time to do whatever school thing they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. That's a really good question. I do know that the internet service providers, they participate in this. And so much of it is them advertising, but also we've done a lot on the education piece to try and get the word out there. It's a good idea. Something we can absolutely take back.
It's a really good idea. And just so you know, Kirsten is capturing everything that you're saying. So all of these things they're not just going into the ether. Go ahead, sir.
I just want to say welcome to Erie County.
Thank you.
For
hearing us on this topic.
Thank you.
Just as the authority that has an incredible public pulpit for the entire state, I think you can really accomplish two major things for the state of Pennsylvania. Number one, the capacity is to normalize a culture of consistently and constantly collecting information about where people are at with their internet access, because this will be ongoing. It's a run and catch up every time these funds come out. And while this is once in a generational, investment, I thought the same thing when the stimulus packages came out during the Obama administration. So here we're seeing it again. So with the ubiquitous nature of the technology, if you could create a culture to actually build the capacity around the Commonwealth to consistently collect this information, that would be amazing. And the second thing is, you heard it here said in several different ways, I think, a central repository for the data of the progress that's being made. So we know if it's truly reaching those that need it the most, those that are, various distinctions from underserved to unserved. If you had a central repository and you worked with planning departments like you're doing, like was just mentioned here in Erie County, I think that would be incredible, because what happens is every time this stuff comes out, we have to run and catch up with these studies. But we don't actually know if we're making progress on the issue. We're reliant heavily on these maps, which are out of date, and then whatever proprietary information that the service providers. And so that kind of brings you to the third piece, which is really holding the internet service providers accountable. It's one thing to have a local provided one that is engaged and active in the community, but most are not. I mean, most exist as, large corporations, and they have strict return on investment models.
So thank you for that piece of feedback. And on your first point, the continued solicitation of feedback, that the authority is a little over a year old at this point. We were formed by Act 96 in May of 2022. So we're a little over a year old, and I think that part of our charter will continue to be these type of events and listening sessions like this. Now, granted, we're doing these ones specifically for the 5-year action plan and the digital equity plan, but we've talked already internally about some potential public comment periods after this and other things like that. So these type of events and soliciting feedback will always be something moving forward, over the past year and then forward, that the authority will certainly be interested in doing. And we have resource accounts. We probably should add a slide or something like that with our resource accounts that you can actually shoot information over to us. So that will be something that we'll always accept input through. And then the last point you had about the ISPs. Yeah, ISPs are they're many times business driven and everything, but I think, and sometimes they're even local government themselves. I think that creating a strong relationship from the state and then also your local governments and then those ISPs that have a business interest. That's truthfully the only way to get this done long term, is to really foster those relationships as best as possible. So that, a lot of times their goal is to add customers to their base, and that's our goal for them too, is to add customers so that we might have different reasons. We want to ensure that everyone is served. So I hear your points on this, so thank you for that.
And to that, I believe there were 2 laws on the books in Pennsylvania as is, where the longest time Pennsylvania actually was below, due to some lobbying from a certain telco provider, below the national standard for broadband access. And so they were able to represent that there was indeed high-speed coverage, even though it was falling below what the national standard would represent. And secondly, I believe Pennsylvania is one of a handful of states that actually prohibits municipalities from coming in and hosting their own broadband service if a broadband service is already available. Well, that broadband service is being provided by the telcos, which again, we've already discussed, that is a for-profit entity. So you're seeing where municipal governments could step in and provide something for their constituents, but are handicapped by some of the laws we have on the books. Also, seriously, beer distributors, can we get rid of that too? But yeah, it's a whole different topic. We're going to put forum on that next week. But I think those are things where we see where some of this inaction from from us as the constituents, looking for the representation we need in Harrisburg to take some of these things off, to make our lives better, and we just haven't seen it. To get a lobbying firm to lobby for some of these broadband initiatives on behalf of the Commonwealth and us consumers would make a lot of sense. And to my date, no one's that I know of is doing that right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's some industry folks that lobby on behalf
Of their industry, yeah.
But not necessarily consumers. Yeah, sure. Oh, on sorry, one last piece that I wanted to respond to was the municipalities. Generally speaking, municipalities are prohibited from becoming ISPs. Having said that, when they have unserved in their municipality and no one is currently proposing to serve them, they can offer what's called a right of first refusal to ISPX. And then, as long as they say, no, we have no intention to serve them, then the municipality can become an ISP in those instances. And many have, not many, some have.
But this now then goes back to the normal makeup of municipal government. Are they willing to fight through the red tape for that very thing, or even are they aware of it? And I think that's, we're seeing a cap there as well.
Right, absolutely.
So in the back, ma'am, and then you're next, sir.
My question is the authority doing anything to lobby Congress to continue to fund ACP given the money is supposed to run out?
I don't know that the authority is necessarily doing that to lobby Congress. We have a kind of different relationship, with the state is kind of talking with our federal partners at this moment to say, hey, this is still needed. And so that's really all I can say on that. I do know that the conversations are certainly happening, though, and it's more of certainly a legislative item for both Pennsylvania and the United States.
It's a good question. I mean, I'll just say, I myself have done ACP sign-up events, and I've sat with people, and as they're trying to type in and navigate the process, and then get on the phone and literally wait an hour, right? I mean, I personally feel that before ACP gets abandoned, that the ease of it and the intuitiveness of it from a user standpoint maybe gets tweaked and improved, right? Because that might see a higher take rate. But
I do know that for some internet, like they have the base plans. I mean, they can make it almost free for the base plans and the criteria. So certainly something that's good. It would take a reauthorization. I mean, currently there's still some funds that exist in there, but as I understand, I don't know the specific numbers, but as I understand, it's starting to be a bit for sure.
We just add on to that quick. It was a good comment to bring up, and we did share info packets with all of you who were not familiar with it, or if you think that people in your communities may not be familiar with it, we do share that. It doesn't just allow a subsidy for service, it also allows up to $100 off of a device, which can be hugely beneficial for people who need a better device to access the internet. It is slated to run out of funding next year, and regardless of what the authority can do politically at this point, there are many people out there who are lobbying for that, and so call your Congress member, submit your own letter. If you're familiar with the program, if you think it's a good program, put your own support on it. There are a lot of people out there who are doing that right now.
Thank you. And sir?
Just from the perspective of, I think Brandon, you mentioned about continued community involvement, conversations, roundtables, dialogues like this. This room is, I don't know everyone in the room, so this is not an overarching statement, but in general, are probably representing an organization, a group, a municipality, representing the Erie Regional Chamber. So we aren't the grassroots folks. We're the folks who know, most of us, not myself, know like my speed. I don't know that, but most of us do or have. That's a really small representation of people outside of these types of rooms. So how do we roll into the broader communities to get to some of the deeper issues, right? So you have the system in place to receive internet. You have, the fiber laid, you have all those things done, but how do you get people to know the next step, right? Like not just grassroots, like there's a level below grassroots that is really the lost sheep of folks that really need to have these resources and are the most disparate in accessing what's available once it finally is. So again, I don't know if it's later down the road or what, but it would be really good to keep that on the radar of the authority, and even all of us in this room that represent organizations, to how do you get to that next level in those rungs lower than just general? Because just because it goes to the school is important, but remember, those, regrettably, most of that information coming from the school is coming through a child who might leave their bag somewhere, or a parent who's disengaged, not intentionally, but because they work multiple jobs.
Absolutely.
Like all those layers. So
Yep.
I just don't want to lose some of that in our dialogue, because sometimes we can be 30,000 feet and not really rubber meets the road. And that's not an indictment, just a commentary.
No, it's
So,
I
excellent.
agree with you, absolutely. You know, these community conversations, each one in each area really takes on its own dynamic, and the folks that attend. We were in Delaware County, was one of our first ones.
Yeah.
You know, it was a room that was an entirely different makeup than the room we have here today. And a lot of it is time of day, when the co-host can host us. So many things, you know, go into that for sure. But you're absolutely right. We need to continue to get to the specific demographic of folks that can tell us about the questions and concerns that they're experiencing. So,
no, and I think this is like a really good room to start in the sense, because
Yeah.
this is, the folks in this room and others will make the decisions and make the moves to provide. But then, again, that next level is letting people know that what is available, how do you access it, discounts if they are you know, eligible for those is just the next tier. I think this is the right room for now, because right now we don't have what we need. Right? So these are the folks, part of the folks who can make sure we have and get the infrastructure that we need. But then, it's, again, I don't know, preaching to
No, it's no, actually
but
though.
it's to tell you, you know, it's the old adage, you know, preaching to the choir, but the choir sometimes needs to hear a word too, right? And a
Yeah.
positive message. So just because it's there, the next level is really letting people know that they have access to it. Why is it important? It does affect their child's education. It does affect their ability to bank online and, you know, beyond, use something for internet beyond your phone. Right? It does. And then when you really get more macro about it, and I'll be quiet after this, it becomes economic development as well.
Absolutely.
Right? So we want to attract people. We had this conversation the other day. We want to attract people and businesses, keep our youngest and brightest from draining out, or at least give them an option to come back. We have to have something for them to come back to, and we have to market it better.
Just a couple comments. A couple days ago, we had we were in Huntington County, and we had a business that responded and said that they could grow their business ×4 if they had better internet access. And he was something like 1 up and like half a meg down or something, vice versa. And you know, he said that he has to get up at 4 a.m. to beat the peak time, the peak speeds when people start to use it, or else he can't operate. He operates an e-commerce business from his house. You know, so he was really struggling. It's that kind of stuff. And the other thing is, yeah, I mean, this is the kind of conversation we need to have now, but I really do believe that we need to have conversations that you're talking about now as well, because this is the 5-year action plan. We are looking out, you know, the 5-year action plan and digital equity action plan. We're looking out, you know, beyond now, and so we need to have some of those conversations now, in my mind.
Yeah, what I would say, 2 things. So Kirsten and I were on a call literally on our drive up here this morning, talking about exactly what you were talking about, which, and with the PBDA, of how do we, these are fantastic, and we're getting tons of important information. We also need to hear from the voices of low-income households and others. And so how do we do that? So stay tuned. And then Kirsten, I think, is going to say, we don't have your names, right? We didn't collect your information.
I have 2 things I wanted to build on, and you all have set it up perfectly here. We have been having these meetings. They are open to the public, and some of them we are getting lots of those members of the general public. I was at one a few weeks ago that had just amazing representation from members of the general public. We are trying to have those conversations at the same time. We are also trying to have conversations with the same people that are in this room, which you get, and it's really great that we had those of you here today, but you will all have noticed we did not ask names. It was open to the public. We didn't want that to be a barrier, but since so many of you are representatives of organizations If you would be willing to leave us your name and your organization, we would happily take it. It is entirely optional, but if you would be willing to leave it, if you would like to be engaged again, I have them by me. I put out a bunch by the door with pens as well. If you would be willing to leave your name and the organization you are with, we would greatly appreciate that. The other thing I wanted to add to that, this is a little bit more complex, but many of you, and some of you have even referenced in your comments today that you're with organizations that offer services or have done surveys or have gathered information or work with partners, work with entities that provide digital literacy types of services. If you would like to leave us the names of any of those, that is the information we're trying to gather from many of you. I would love to follow up if you're willing to list down anything that you're familiar with in this area that we should know of that offers those services, or leave your name and we can follow up with you. Again, I put these little colored pads out all over by the exit here, or come over and talk to any of us. We can give you our contact, our card.
We are actually right at time, and so we want to be sensitive to the fact that we've taken up an hour and a half of your time. It's been really generous.
I just want to say one more thing in closing. This is really important work. Brandon, Beth, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Super.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for sharing.